We are interrupting our scheduled broadcast for a special edition version of our monthly VR gaming news videos. June is pretty much dead, not enough going on to fill a whole video, so instead we'll have a look at the 5 biggest titles that are announced for the rest of the year, sorted by my personal hype level. Let's get to it. The first game on our list is Alien Rogue Incursion. There's only a tiny sliver of gameplay revealed so far, so everything we got to go on is a short teaser trailer and a few sentences on the game's website. Quote, "This brand new single-player action horror VR game features an original story that fully surrounds players with the terrors of the Alien universe, designed by Alien fans for Alien fans. Survios brings their expertise to crafting this technically advanced and frightfully immersive Alien virtual reality game." End quote. The game is supposed to be mainly inspired by Alien Isolation. Makes sense. Alien Isolation is an awesome Alien horror game that initially was supposed to ship with VR support. It never did officially, but the VR version was always in the game's files, so it did not take long for people to figure out how to get them to work. So Alien Isolation, while never an official VR game, was always, let's say, VR adjacent and stands in high regard in the VR community. Looking at the weaponry in the trailer, I would wager a guess that this will be a bit more on the actiony side compared to Alien Isolation. We get 2 more pieces of info from the teaser right here. First, that the game is planned for holidays, so December this year, and that it comes to the PSVR 2, PCVR and the Quest 3. And only the Quest 3. This announcement marks the beginning of the end of an era, the end of the Quest 2 life cycle. That was bound to happen sooner or later, but still might be a surprise for some. Last Christmas the Quest 2 still outsold the Quest 3 by a factor of 3 to 1, so a lot of people just got one. If you only play natively on the Quest 2, then you'll have to upgrade, either get a gaming PC or a Quest 3. Note that the Quest Pro is also no longer supported. For me, as a mainly PC VR player and for VR gaming in general, this is actually good news. The vast majority of VR games these days are designed primarily to run on the Quest, even if they get a PC and a PlayStation version. And as the Quest 3 is quite a bit more powerful, that means we will be getting bigger and more ambitious VR games from now on. Alien Rogue Incursion is just the first game that announced dropping Quest 2 support. Many others will follow. We actually have another game on this list, so we'll talk about this topic a bit more later in the video. With making this, Survios have quite an impressive number of games in their gameography. Is that a word? They were pumping out several games a year with a decent enough review scores in the beginning, and that fell off around here. Nowadays they are mainly doing licensed IP games. Creed has the official license of this Rocky spin-off movie. It's probably one of the better known VR boxing games, though Thrill of the Fight is much more beloved. Westworld Awakening stands in high regard with many, though for some it was too much of a horror game. And then there was the disaster of The Walking Dead Onslaught, not to confuse with the excellent The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, about which we'll incidentally talk a bit more later in the video. Anyway, let's get back to the Alien game for a second. When the game was first announced in 2022, it was announced as playable on a flat screen and in VR. These plans seem to have changed, as it is now revealed as a VR-only title. I wonder why that is. Maybe Survios realized that they are passionate about VR after all and like making VR games better, or they realized that their approach of designing a VR game would not translate well to a flat game, or they just feel that their game would not be able to compete with the quality of other flat games. Who knows? I'm a bit cautious with building hype for this one. The key art for the game looks pretty terrible. The little bit of gameplay we have seen runs with a very low frame rate, and it's not that it's super early and the game is supposed to release in a couple of months. Then there's Survios' bad track record with their later games. It seems though that they have changed strategy in 2021. They have taken a lot more time to focus on one game. I guess that is a good sign. We'll probably see a much more ambitious title than ever before from them. So I'm still looking forward to it, but with a healthy dose of skepticism. Unfortunately, we have another one here where we have more to talk about the controversies around the game than about the game itself. Batman Arkham Shadow. Let's start with what we know. Very little at this point. We know that it is an official entry in the Batman Arkham series. The Ratcatcher will probably be the main antagonist, or at least play a major role in the story, which is supposed to play between Arkham Origins and Arkham Asylum. I'll have to assume that this will be more of a stealth focused game because of the title, and something like this just would not work in VR, but we'll have to wait and see. Studio founder of developer Camouflage has this to say about the game. Collaborating closely with Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment and DC, we aim to deliver an authentic new entry in the celebrated Arkham franchise, something that the series' millions of fans will know is no easy feat. The prospect of adding a new chapter to such a storied franchise is exhilarating. We are committed to building upon the beloved foundation laid by the legendary team at Rocksteady and driven to do it justice. So basically we still know nothing about the game, except a release window of late this year. A full trailer, hopefully with some gameplay footage, will be premiered at Geoff Keighley's Trailer Extravaganza, the Summer Games Fest, on June 7th. The main topic for gaming media outlets was the dislike ratio on the trailer on IGN's YouTube channel. The trailer, with over 1 million views, which is extremely high for a VR game, was massively downvoted because the game is VR only. And I get it, and also it doesn't matter. I get it because the Arkham series is such a beloved franchise. Every single entry sits on an overwhelmingly positive rating, except Arkham Origins, the only game in the series that was not made by Rocksteady but by Warner Bros. Montreal, and even Origins is still very highly rated. That was up to and including the release of Arkham Knight 9 years ago. After that, Rocksteady was working on the ill-fated Suicide Squad game, with that being a major flop and the reported talent drain that Rocksteady was experiencing during its development. The future of the franchise is up in the air. People just want another Batman Arkham game, not this live service garbage. And now this, a cool looking trailer for exactly the game people were hoping for drops. Everybody gets really excited until the very end, where the trailer is like, nope, not for you. Of course people are going to be disappointed. I absolutely get it. It's not like it's a replacement for a flat game. If Arkham Shadow were not going to happen, there would not be a flat Arkham game instead, and people obviously know that. It's just when you get hyped about something just to get kicked on the balls at the end of a trailer, not a great feeling. But it doesn't matter. We have seen this all before with Half-Life Alyx. That was pretty much the same story. There were a lot of people very disappointed with finally a new Half-Life game, and then nope, in VR only. After the release of Alyx, all the criticism pretty much just disappeared, and the same will happen with Arkham Shadow if the game delivers. But there's another nuance to it. It's not that the game is VR only, it's Quest 3 only. It's not coming to any other platform. No PC VR, no PlayStation VR, no Quest 2 or Pro. Quest 3 only. That is quite the restriction. Arkham Shadow is not made by Rocksteady, obviously. They were busy ruining their own reputation. It is made by a studio called Camouflage. Camouflage was founded by Ryan Payton, who previously worked on several Metal Gear Solid titles at Kojima Productions, then joined 343 to work on Halo 4. The first major game with this newly founded studio was Iron Man for the PlayStation VR 1. In 2022, the studio teased a big new project for the PSVR 2, which was never going to happen, as the studio was bought by Meta just a short time later, and that explains the Quest 3 exclusive part. As we discussed earlier, last Christmas the Quest 2 still outsold the Quest 3 by a factor of 3 to 1. That is unheard of. That an older console generation outsells the newer generation shortly after its release, that just doesn't happen, and you can bet your ass that Meta are not very happy with these numbers. Batman Arkham Shadow is Meta's strategy to change that. This is supposed to be the new Quest 3 system seller. Before that, there really wasn't one. I'm pretty sure that Meta are now regretting their decision to make Asgard's Wrath 2 playable on the Quest 2, and Camouflage are here to correct that mistake. But for that to work, the game has to knock it out of the park. This has to deliver. It would be my guess that Meta are pouring a lot of resources into this project, while that will not guarantee a good game, obviously. IGN inadvertently created a meme with their review of Rocksteady's Batman Arkham Asylum.
Arkham Asylum makes you feel like you're Batman.
Playing this game actually makes me feel like a guy sitting in front of a screen playing a video game. In VR, the feeling like being Batman could be much more accurate if done well. Rocksteady have tried themselves with a VR version of Batman Arkham in 2016 to not so great success. I do trust Camouflage, as being a dedicated VR studio, to do a better job, and it's probably going to be a pretty ambitious project. I don't have a Quest 3 and I don't intend to get one. I'm riding the Deckard Copium train and I'm not getting off, so I'm not going to play this. Sucks, but it is what it is. I still hope it's going to be a good one. We have yet another VR entry to a beloved flat game series, again made by a seasoned VR studio, but about this one we know quite a bit more. In Metro Awakening we once again descend into the tunnel networks below Moscow. It is the year 2028, about 5 years before the events of the first Metro game. You don't play as Artyom in this one, but as Serdar, a doctor searching for his wife and her medication, awakening the force he is to become. It is described as a supernatural origin story, and Reddit already has theories going whose awakening we are going to witness, and yeah, it seems pretty obvious. They are calling this a new story-driven adventure built exclusively for VR that blends atmospheric exploration, stealth and combat in the most immersive Metro experience yet. That's quite a big call. I've also seen a bit of disappointment about this being VR only, but very muted in comparison, as Vertigo and Deep Silver are quick to assure that another mainline Metro game by 4A Games is currently in the works. Is that 4A or quadruple A? You know, as in Skull and Bones. This is the first game on the list I'm genuinely excited about. It is made by Vertigo Games, the studio behind Arizona Sunshine, After the Fall and The Seventh Guest. I absolutely love The Seventh Guest, and their shooters are getting noticeably better with every release. To me, Arizona Sunshine 2 was just one step away from reaching greatness, and with Metro Awakening, Vertigo might be able to take that step. Hopefully. Why am I so excited about this one? Well, for one, I love the Metro games, all 3 of them. I think they are awesome. They have so many immersive elements, things like pumping the pneumatic guns or your flashlight, changing gas mask filters, wiping your gas mask. These are all mechanics with very little gameplay value that are just there to immerse you in the world, and they are very successful in that goal and being part of the incredible world building that just draws you in a bit deeper than most other games manage to achieve. At least most other flat games, even though they are implemented in the most unimmersive way. Wipe your gas mask, press a button. Pump your gun, press a button repeatedly. There's just no better way to do it on a flat screen game, but in VR. Whenever I play a Metro game, I can't help but feel that these games were meant for VR, and Vertigo are sure to make the most of it. Lose yourself in an authentic Metro experience as you reload weapons, change your filters, charge your torch and more, in a tactile experience that VR and Metro fans will love. Movement and weapons all feel pretty weighty in the original games, which is hard to do in VR. I'm curious to see if they managed to recreate that somehow. Also, the Metro games were pretty creepy, especially the first 2 parts. If they lean into that, which they might because of the supernatural nature of the story, it could turn out to be quite horrifying in VR. I'm guessing this will be a bit back to the roots, a more linear story-driven game like the first 2 parts of the series, mainly because of the setting. We are going back to the Metro after all, and it's also more the style of game that Vertigo are used to make. By the way, Metro Awakening is written by Dmitry Glukhovsky, the author of the original Metro books on which the whole game series is based. That's super awesome. The game's release is set to 2024, nothing more concrete than that, and it will come to all major VR platforms, including the Quest 2, which was absolutely normal and expected just a short while ago, but now sounds kinda worrying to be honest. It's going to be fine.
But heroes don't survive the Forsaken Lands. Only monsters do.
As a diseased wanderer, lost in the frigid Forsaken Lands, you travel through strange otherworldly environments and take down giant behemoths. Skydance's Behemoth was first announced at a Meta Connect back in 2022. A cinematic trailer premiered at the Game Awards a bit later. Initially only called Behemoth and planned for late 2023, the game was delayed by a whole year, with a new release window now being late 2024. Behemoth is an action-adventure and a monster hunting game with survival elements. The game will feature weighty VR combat with lifelike physics that you'll use against deadly warriors and the title-giving Behemoth. There will be natural blocking and parrying. Enemies will try to predict the angle of your attack or move their weapons in place to parry you. That means you might have to use feints to mislead them. That is for the human enemies anyways. The behemoths you'll first need to track down, solve complex traversal puzzles before getting into epic boss battles against the gigantic creatures. You'll also have access to a grappling hook, which lets you create ropes that have a physical presence on the world to climb wherever you want or to yank whatever or whomever you want. According to PlayStation Blog, a large emphasis for the team was to build impressive and memorable landscapes that are both brutal and beautiful. Great sheer cliffs descend into the foggy unknown, a massive glacier looming over a ruined coast, caves that descend through the darkness into massive underground lakes, and threaded into all of it is the ancient remnants of a collapsed civilization and the secrets its ruins may still hold. There will be a survival aspect to the whole shebang that is inspired by the studio's previous title, The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners. So maybe there will be some sort of resource gathering and crafting involved. That was a pretty central part of the Saints and Sinners games. This thing sounds incredibly ambitious, at least on paper. It sounds like the biggest and most ambitious title on this list, and I hope Skydance Interactive are up to the task. The long delay from the original release window implies that they were a bit surprised about the scale of the project themselves, but I'm cautiously optimistic. If there's one VR studio that can pull this off, then it probably would be Skydance Interactive, not only because they have the backing of the fairly big Skydance media group, but for one, the gameplay trailer looks pretty good, and because of the Saints and Sinners games. Saints and Sinners released back in 2020, a time that was the peak of VR gaming. We got Boneworks, The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, and Half-Life Alyx, all within like 3 months. Prior to that, there was still a lot of learning, a lot of experimenting on how to do VR interactions right, but these 3 games had it perfected, and will always be remembered as giants of VR gaming. The second chapter of Saints and Sinners was a bit disappointing, as it was just more of the same, and Skydance don't seem to be particularly interested in supporting it, leaving Retribution at negative Steam reviews because of the relatively buggy state the game is left in. I'm going to assume that the main focus is and was on Behemoth. Still not a very good look for the studio, as we won't know how much they are willing to support their next game. But yeah, I like the look of the gameplay footage and the whole premise sounds awesome. I'm cautiously optimistic that they can pull it off. Skydance's Behemoth is scheduled for a release on all major VR platforms late this year. Okay, look, that I have this one as my #1 most anticipated game of the year might be just a bit of a personal opinion. Well, the whole list here is personal opinion, but this one might not be shared by everyone. But for me, Into the Radius is a very special game, and thus for me, Into the Radius 2 is my most anticipated game of the year. It all started in 1972, when the Strugatsky brothers published their science fiction novel Roadside Picnic. It tells of the aftermath of an event called the Visitation, where presumably aliens have landed on Earth, without their arrival, departure or themselves ever being witnessed by anyone. All that is left of their presence are 6 visitation zones that contain inexplicable phenomena and strange artifacts. The visitation zones are sealed off by their respective governments trying to control the extraction of the potentially extremely dangerous artifacts inside. But that did not stop a culture of scavengers to emerge, who enter the zones illegally to steal the artifacts and sell them on the black market. They call themselves stalkers. Roadside Picnic was extremely influential, being the direct or indirect inspiration for a ton of works across all forms of media, most notably a movie called Stalker from 1979 by visionary Soviet filmmaker Andrei Tarkovsky, and the Stalker video game series by Ukrainian studio GSC Game World, which will get its 4th entry this year, by the way. There were a couple of Stalker-like VR games, but only Into the Radius managed to achieve widespread success. You play as an explorer, officially employed by a government agency to recover valuable artifacts from the Pechorsk security zone. The game structure has more in common with an extraction shooter like a PvE version of Tarkov than with the Stalker games. From your safe house you go out into the zone to scavenge for loot, to use and to sell. Meanwhile you're trying to complete quests that let you level up the trader to get better gear, which in turn let you delve deeper into the more dangerous areas of the zone. The game features very realistic weapon handling, an involved attachment system, survival elements and a strong focus on exploration. Into the Radius 2 will be very similar to its predecessor. It's more of a refinement of its system than a complete overhaul. The most notable difference will be a clear visual uplift and the addition of co-op. I don't know what to think about the co-op, to be completely honest. Into the Radius was a very solemn and solitary experience. A lot of the atmosphere builds upon the fact that you are the only living being in the zone, and I think that would be lost a bit in co-op play. On the other hand, Into the Radius is a horrifying game. It might be one of the scariest gaming experiences I've ever had, and I'm pretty sure it's too much for some, so co-op could make the game more accessible, which would be a good thing. But we cannot talk about Into the Radius Radios without at least mentioning the studio behind it and the way the game came to be. Into the Radios as well as its sequel are made by CM Games, short for Creative Mobile, a pretty big studio with over 100 employees based in Tallinn, Estonia, who are mainly known for making mobile games and are very successful at it. They do have an R&D department though, where people are encouraged to test new things, and Into the Radios was born from one of those experiments as a passion project from a single developer. Over the time the team grew slowly until the game was released into Steam Early Access in 2019. The first release was not so good and landed to mixed reviews, but they listened to all the feedback and kept improving the game with very close contact to the community, and Into the Radios grew into one of the best VR games on the market. For the sequel, they continued with this community-driven development philosophy. Even before the early access launch, they are very open with every feature and change they are planning to implement into the sequel, gathering all the feedback. The team has grown to 25 people now, still only a small part of the studio's workforce, but if you look at their website, Into the Radios is basically all you see. It was successful enough to be made a major part of the studio's identity. It's just such a beautiful story, especially with everything we hear about AAA game development these days, where talented people or whole studios are burned being forced to make a game nobody wants to make and to play for that matter. Rocksteady were just the latest but probably not the last example. CM Games encouraging their people to pursue their passion projects and then giving them the needed support when the project sees its success seems to be such a stark contrast to that, and I just love seeing that approach being successful for them. Also, a mobile game studio finding success when pivoting to VR is a beautiful thing. I'm very sure that Into the Radios 2 is going to be even better than the first. They have a team that is genuinely passionate about the game. They have this development process that is very open to community feedback. They have this incredible game to build upon. It's very unlikely that is going to be a disappointment. Into the Radios 2 is scheduled to release this summer into Steam Early Access. A full release as well as a release on other platforms is planned for 2025. Okay, one honorable mention here at the end, as this video replaces my usually monthly new VR games video. There's actually only one interesting title that is confirmed for a June release, and that is Shell Games' Silent Slayer: Vault of the Vampire. It's kind of a dexterity game for VR mixed with a few jump scares. Seems like a fun little project. It's a smaller scale game, a budget title, which is on par for Shell Games. It's a strategy that has worked out for them. So far they only have delivered high quality products. Silent Slayer: Vault of the Vampire is scheduled to release on June 6th, only for the Quest, which is a bit of a bummer as all their previous games were multi-platform. So there we have it. That is it for this year. We will of course see a whole lot of smaller games too, so I expect to return to the usual format next month. And yeah, even though the first half of 2024 was terrible for VR, it's going to be strong here if all of these games actually release. In the past I was always like, VR needs more AAA games because it's 99% indie studios for now, but I'm kind of over that. Ubisoft did a decent job last year with Assassin's Creed Nexus, but for them the game was a failure. They announced they will no longer invest into VR, and I say, good riddance. We have so many excellent studios that grew by making VR games, whose projects get bigger, better and more ambitious every time. They will fill this void, and for now we are spared, for the most part at least, all the AAA bullshit and should savor this time while it lasts. It won't last forever. I will have a dedicated Into the Radios video on this channel soonish, basically a love letter to the game. Subscribe if you're interested. See ya.